So public goods are a situation, they're a very specific type of good, and it's a situation in which when you leave the market alone, it may not actually produce the efficient outcome. So it may be a reason where the government can actually get involved and improve on market outcomes. Actually, government involvement can move the market closer to the efficient outcome. So to understand why that is, first we have to understand what we mean when we say public goods. In economics, when we say a public good, we mean very specifically, we're not talking about a good that's government provided or not government. That's not the definition. When we say public good in economics, we mean very specifically a good that has these two characteristics, meaning a good that is non-rival in consumption. I could say in consumption. Meaning, if I'm consuming it, you can consume exactly the same level at exactly the same time. So a TV broadcast would be non-rival, right? Because if you're watching the NFL playoffs, then you're watching it, and just because I turn on the game doesn't mean you get to watch less of the game, right? Me watching the game, you get to watch exactly the same amount of the game. Everyone can consume the same amount of the game. One person's consumption doesn't take away from it. As opposed to, let's say, a hamburger, right? A hamburger, if there's one hamburger and I eat some of it, that's less that you can eat. That would be entirely excludable. Entirely rival in consumption. If I'm consuming it, there's less for you to consume. So a public good is non-rival. It's there and everyone can consume it in the same amount. Like a street light. If the street light is on, me being able to see because of the street light doesn't diminish the amount of the street light you're able to see with. Non-excludable means you can't stop somebody from benefiting from it, even if they haven't paid for it. You can't, and this doesn't mean that you can't because we've chosen by law not to exclude people. Like you'd say, oh, well, we say everyone's allowed to go to elementary school, but that's not non-excludable. We've decided to provide it, but it's absolutely an excludable good, just like colleges, right? I can say you can't come to this class unless you've paid. There are elementary schools that say you can't come to school, elementary and secondary schools, so you can't come to the school unless you pay. It's absolutely excludable. So that I want to emphasize that when we're talking about excludability, we're not talking about how the government has chosen to provide it. We're talking about the very nature of the good. You cannot stop somebody from enjoying this and benefiting from this good, even if they haven't paid for it. And so, like mosquito control, right? If we spray for all the mosquitoes and they all die, but you didn't chip in to pay for mosquito spraying, it's not like we can't stop you from benefiting from the fact that there's no mosquitoes. National defense, also a really good example. If we're protecting the country and you haven't paid anything to protect the country, but we're stopping people from invading, we can't stop you from enjoying the benefits of that. That's when we say non-excludable, I mean the very nature of the good makes it impossible to stop people from using it, even if they haven't paid for it. But again, there's degrees of excludability, so it's not like binary yes or no. And so I made this little chart over here. Not that we're really going to fill it in a lot, but just to give you a sense. So if something is absolutely non-rival and absolutely non-excludable, that would be a pure public good. That's when we say a public good, we mean something that you can't exclude. So national defense would be a good example of this. If I'm being protected, that might be a little bit rival, right? If I'm being protected, maybe we can't protect everybody the same. But it isn't excludable. If you're protecting the country, you're protecting everybody in the country from invasion. There may be other benefits they're not getting. A lighthouse is a good example, right? I said street lights before, but a lighthouse, right? It's out there, it's putting its light out saying, stay away from these rocks, stay away from these rocks. And if I'm seeing the light telling me stay away from the rocks, it doesn't stop you from seeing the same light and knowing the rocks are there also. So my consumption in no way diminishes your consumption. And if the light's on, shining out across the ocean, there's no way to stop people from benefiting from seeing that light. So a lighthouse is a really good example of something that is both non-rival and non-excludable. And at the other end, if it's entirely rival and entirely excludable, that would be like my hamburger, right? That would be saying, if I consume this hamburger, you can't consume this hamburger. And if there's hamburgers out there, but you don't pay for a hamburger, I can stop you from having a hamburger. if you don't pay for either the hamburger itself or the ingredients for the hamburger, you can be stopped from consuming the hamburger. So so when we talk about, regular operation of markets, we're typically talking about private goods, right? That individuals pay for if they want them, and then if they consume them, other people aren't consuming them. But things can have sort of a degree of rivalness or a degree of excludability. So like, you can't really stop people. I mean, you can stop people from getting an education, even if they haven't paid. But how rival is it? Is, a classroom rival? Well, with 2 or 3 students, not so much, but with the 100 students, another student added. So maybe, maybe elementary education might be there. I don't know. This isn't an answer. I'm just illustrating that different goods can sort of lie somewhere on the spectrum. Or like a road. Is a road rival? Well, Interstate 5 down by Buttonwillow is pretty non-rival. Have you ever driven Interstate 5 down Buttonwillow? But it's pretty non-rival. So yeah, there's not a lot of people there, so really low rival. But it's not hard to put a toll on an interstate. It is costly though, so we would say it's excludable but at a cost, but pretty non-rival. So I-5 in Buttonwillow. But I-5 in Sacramento at rush hour is really rival. More people on it, it's really, really hard. And so it's highly rival. Harder to exclude, a bigger cost, because if you have a toll on a really, really busy road, then things back up even more. So I-5 and Sac at rush hour. Again, I'm not, this, you never be like quizzed on where do these things belong. But just to give you an idea of, it's not an either or, it's a spectrum. But when we talk about public goods, we mean things that are down here in this corner where they are entirely non-rival and non-excludable. Down here, these are sometimes, it's not a uniformly used word, but sometimes referred to as club goods, things where you can exclude people, but they're not rival. This would be like cable TV, right? You can charge people, they can't use it unless they pay, but the more people that use it, except when the cable gets really crowded and your service slows down, but pretend that doesn't happen. But if I'm watching a show, that doesn't mean you can watch less of the show, right? And so that would be something that's not really rival, but entirely excludable. And then just to complete it, something that's very, very rival, but not at all excludable, something maybe like clean air, like common resources. They're out there. We can't stop you from using up the air, but without regulation, right? It's just there. So it is kind of rival. I mean, if I use up the clean air, then it's not clean anymore for you, right? But we can't really stop people from using the air. And so any sort of common resource that you can't stop people from using, but if one person uses it, it actually does decrease the amount. Or like, a lake that's full of fish, right? And let's say nobody owns it, so there are no property rights, the government hasn't gotten involved yet, and everyone can just wander in and fish if you're not excluding people. But it is rival, because the more people that fish on it, the less fish there are for everybody else. So that's just sort of hopefully giving a better picture of what we mean when we talk about these. When we talk about public goods, that's what we're talking about. So to give you an idea of what we mean when we're talking about non-rival and non-excludable, a public good is one where you cannot stop somebody from consuming it, even if they haven't paid for it. And my consumption, and know that the good is produced, and everyone, the mosquitoes are all dead, and me benefiting from mosquitoes being dead doesn't decrease your benefit from the mosquitoes being dead. So it's non-excludable and non-rival. So why doesn't the government provide public goods? I mean, why doesn't the government? Why don't free markets produce public goods efficiently? We'll talk about that in a sec.